Can you hear me? I gotta switch over my microphone. All right. How is that? Is that better?
Yeah, that's
Hopefully. Why? Oh, this is a safe place. I'm not gonna yell at you. I'm not. Thank you, I need it. Oh, I did not know that. How do I... set limit? Thing is I'm scared. I don't even know if I should be in this Discord because I know how people are. And I set the title of the room to Proof of God. And that's going to trigger a lot of, you know, incel losers. You know what I mean, though? So, all right, so set. You should stay. You should just stay. Like, alrighty. We'll do 5. We'll just do 5 because I don't know what I'm getting myself into. All right, how do I share my screen? Probably should have been a little bit more prepared, so it's not just my face. Let's do a new scene, maybe. Share screen. Okay. Can do that. That works. Sure. All right. So, you are sharing another application window. I'm going to delete this. Let me just make sure this is what I want to share. Let's see. 5. Step 9. Yes, okay. Guess I should have some music so it's not so dull also. Well, the thing is if I share music, then maybe it'll get demonetized, and I want this as evidence. Okay, I guess we just gotta suffer without to have no music. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do my best to explain the philosophy. It's been about a year since I have gone over or even worked on it at all. It's been about a year. I gave up on it. Well, I say gave up. I mean, I'm working on it right now, so technically I didn't give up entirely, but I took a break from it, I should say, because it was too much. It was too overwhelming. Um, I was getting lost in the work on what, like, how to professionally commit the paper to somebody that actually knows what they're doing. Um, I I don't have that know-how. I'm just an average guy that wanted to try to prove God. and I didn't know anything about philosophy. So it took a long time for me to learn. And so there's just a lot of stuff, like the paper in its entirety is over 50 pages. It's something like 60, 70 pages, something crazy. And the amount of sourcing I needed to do was just too much. And to be honest, I didn't know where I was pulling all of my information from, because I was using AI to get some info. But it's just the way it played out. Um, I had a lot of different influences in the philosophy itself. I um, What mainly kickstarted it was I was talking to this guy about the law of identity, and how atoms, or elements rather. Um, I remember telling him that gold is always going to be gold, and then um, I remember telling him that atoms are the culmination of um, what was it? It was three things. It was math, I think. It was. See, this is the problem. It's been so long. That elements are on. It was like metaphysical, physical, and mathematical, or something like that. And then it like was like a eureka moment for me, because I realized that the hold on. What's up, Ferk? I'm kind of doing a monologue real quick, and then I'll get back with you. Okay. I'm gonna deafen for a little bit. You don't have to stick around. It's fine. Okay, so back to what I was saying. It was like a eureka moment for me, that to like think in my head that there was that elements, the atoms are like this construct of this like metaphysical thing, that they're also a mathematical thing, right? Those two things alone are very mind, like the philosophical baggage there was heavy, because it's not just physical, right? Like the atom itself is physical, sure, but then you're getting into like the what makes the atom is entirely reliant on the process of the math involved, right? Um, with like, I think it's like six protons will always be a carbon, you know. Um, and from my understanding, math is a universal language, like the SETI experiment, the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. We use math as the language binder between the two. We send out like this thing trying to prove we're intelligent, and it's like math and geometry stuff, right? So, and it's my belief that math is something discovered, not invented. Um, so, and I was just like, wait a second, elements are, they have math involved. They have a physical identity. They have an identity. That identity will remain the same. And and then there's also that metaphysical aspect where like uh, the element binds specifically to certain elements, and there's like preferential treatments going on in elements. Like some elements will only bind with others. Um, And within the atom itself, there's preference going on. There's like organization with the proton, neutron, electron stuff. And that really got me thinking. And sorry that took a while, but um, I I thought that in our understanding of the world, it's important to me that we try to find the root of all things, like the thing that undermines truth. You want to go as far back as you can. And I think elements are or atoms rather, are a very um, small thing to get to the bottom of. It undermines a lot of our reality. And it's a very new subject, quantum physics and stuff like that. So I so I started, working on this philosophy to try to prove God through elements. And it was a process of over a year. As I was working on it, I felt like some stuff was missing, some stuff I just was straight up wrong about, um, which is fine. It's a learning experience. But the thing that never changed was me wanting to prove that there is an intelligent designer. Because what I did see was, I do see that there is intelligence in the system. And I don't want to just throw the words intelligent design next to each other because those words are used a lot in the current debate sphere of, theism. But, you put that aside, you put like the current debates aside, and like if you just look at it, without smuggling in any like assumptions or anything like that, again, like of things that you've heard other people say, and you just like look at it, you can figure it out. You can see, that there is some kind of design going on, especially when you get into biology. It's not as clear when you're in chemistry, but it's there. You can see preference. You can see preference in chemistry. And that's what I was seeing. I was seeing preference in, the not like how the stuff binds together preferentially. I was seeing that by the atoms themselves. You undermine the chemistry of it all. What do you got? You got atoms and how those act, and there's preference in the system of the atom, and like so I start asking myself, um, is this really preference? It's like, damn right it's preference. You know, um, it's selectivity. It's it's reliable selectivity. It's meaningful. I think if you don't acknowledge the philosophical baggage that comes with what is biology, then you're basically it's like you're closing your eyes, you're plugging your ears, and going la 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 la. This isn't actually an intelligent system. It's just is. It's just something, right? Which I can't adopt that point of view. Um, I never really had that point of view. Even when I was like an atheist, I just hadn't like investigated the subject of God. I was very interested in science. I loved science. I thought um, I had my own kind of inclinations of stuff, but all of science is it's too much to know all by yourself. A lot of people they know a lot about little. They know a lot about one subject, and that's it, you know? Some people, they'll know a lot about a couple subjects, sure. Well, my interest was, like, kind of just I wanna know baseline, like, I wanna know the important stuff, or rather the interesting stuff in each field, you know? And I thought that quantum physics was really something special. And for me, what really got my gears turning, questioning my atheism, questioning um, this concept of God in the first place, was the fact that the world was working in this very odd, peculiar way where you could you could take one atom and then another atom and then put them in synchronization so that they work together no matter where they are. Um, you had things that appeared to be random that function extremely differently. And like, they can be in one spot, they can be in two spots simultaneously, pop, 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 and it seemed random, but really, you still have constraints. You still had constraints there, so it wasn't totally random. It was probabilistic. So, it was things like that. And, obviously I mean, not obviously, but, the double slit experiment is very fascinating. Thought to myself, how the observer, it was strange to me that it appeared to be that the observer was a variable in the outcome of the experiment. You look at these was it photons? These particles being shot through a slit. If you didn't pay attention, they would go through two slits. If you did pay attention, it would only go through one slit. Now, I don't know how accurate that is to this day, but at the time, those fascinated me and it got me to question some things. And so I started looking at the bigger picture, and there are some facts that kind of shattered my belief in there is no God. That was that Earth has the majority of the elements that are available um, naturally. I think it's like 91 of 96 or 98 or something like that elements we have here on Earth, and they're in just the right percentage for them to not kill us. And that was fascinating to me. Um, and then the more I found out about the conditions for life to even arise, it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier. You find out that the planet, in order for it to be habitable, needs to have a active core. That the active core needs to be um, a specific kind of viscosity uh, and made up of specific elements. And uh, Earth needs to be alive. The planet needs to be alive a specific time. The the um the planet needs to be a specific size. The crust needs to be a specific uh, density. Needs to have specific elements within the crust and the ozone, and there needs to be different layers of the atmosphere, and there needs to be the shield for the radiation from the star. The star needs to be a certain distance. The star needs to be emitting certain radiation. The star needs to be a certain age. The star needs to not be violent. Like there's just so much going on, and that we took for granted. I took for granted. Um, and the explanation as to why uh why we're alive is people just write it off as like this to me it's an obnoxious god of the gaps. Like I see it as so obnoxious. They just say, oh well, there's so many stars out there, there's got to be another one. Well, that is incredibly lazy. And what makes me mad is that I fell for a lot of this stuff because you just hear it surface level and you go along with it. Um, but ultimately, it is so lazy to just say, "Oh, well, there's so many planets out there. There has to be aliens because there are so many planets, even like ours, right?" But the fact of the matter is if you actually did the homework and you look and you you use your best information available, you find that the odds are not in our favor. At least that's what I found, and I've heard otherwise. I've heard that scientists that claim to be smarter than me with degrees and whatnot, they'll sit and say, "Oh well, no, actually, there's actually quite a few worlds that are habitable based on my calculations." Um, and I didn't find the same calculations he did. I think we need to be very, 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 very critical and look at every potential failure, right? Like if you don't include that the planet has needs to have an active dynamo in your variable in your calculations, then it's already a failure, you know. And these scientists that claim to be super smart, you know, I think it's very easy to forget stuff. I'm not saying they're lazy. I'm just saying that it's very easy to get your calculations wrong. And I'm somebody who is obsessed. I get obsessed with uh, the truth. If I find my answer, I want to double check it. I want to triple check it. I want to quadruple check it. I want to make sure that I want to see the lengths of the truth because I'm somebody that sees truth, but then there's a degree to truth, right? I find it fascinating when you find out that something is so impossible that it's mathematically impossible, you know. So that's the kind of person I am, and I understand there is certain degrees of skepticism that are not healthy, that are not good, not helpful, but it's just how I am. And that's the kind of mindset I came into this philosophy with. So, circling back to the philosophy, all right. I shared why I got started in the first place was I couldn't accept my atheism anymore. I saw that um, I saw that there was something more going on there. Now I didn't understand what. I didn't understand if we were in a simulation. Um, I didn't understand if we were placed by aliens, things like that. And these are the kinds of things I wanted to get to the bottom of. And so I went on my own little journey. And, in a way, it's kind of like eating an elephant one bite at a time. You got one little piece of information, and then that little piece of information, um, you know, it has implications on all the other information sometimes and can actually make the whole process easier through process of elimination, like okay, it can't be this, it can't be that, right? um so that being said, I found myself concluding very quickly that we were not in a simulation, quite like Elon Musk had me believing for a little while there. Um, that we are not just a product of randomness, like the secular, um, oh gee, what kind of like the Darwinians, or I don't know how to word it, Darwinianists, how they try to frame it. Um, through further investigation, you find that these people that claim evolution, they were under the pretense of uh, evolution being random. But the reality is those claims are so unbelievably outdated, and they come from people like Jacques Monod and Ernst Mayr. Like they're from like the 70s or 80s, and like, sorry, alleles are not actually random. Their mutations aren't actually random. Um, but the world is led to believe that the claims that are just accepted just keep being accepted, not challenged, which is sad. Uh, because like I said, from my research, I have found that God seems to be provable. It seems to be provable that there is a God through logic, and it's very difficult to convey. As I'm explaining it, I'm going to struggle. Be- Not just because I haven't gone over it in a long time, but because it's complicated and there's many steps. There's many steps in trying to uh, build the case as to why there is evidence for God in the first place. And unfortunately, I am going to have to use AI to help elaborate and verify some of the things I'm saying, which is fine. I get there's going to be pushback. Um, in fact, if I had to guess, if there were people like me listening, I would imagine only maybe 10% of people like me would accept what is going to happen, like what this is going to conclude, because it's so difficult to share. Um, what ends up happening along my philosophy journey is I I deviate from my initial hunch that um, that elements are a rational structure, which I still think they are, but I find that in the arguments that I do have of that is that there are there are facts that undermine that kind of claim that I try to make. And so what I ended up finding was, well, I need to go back to what undermines. Like what is the core? What is the most true something can be? And I found the atom, the atom of philosophy, the smallest, most true thing possible was um, that there is thought. So uh, Rene Descartes, this is inspired by Descartes. So I'm somebody that didn't know anything about philosophy. I would just go in discords and I would listen to people argue, and I would just sit there and I would listen. I wouldn't even participate. I would just sit there and listen. I I heard about Descartes' demon and things like that, and so I thought Descartes was a bad person for a long time there. Um, so, but one day I was doing some research, and then I found that Descartes had a likeness to me. He wanted the thing that was like the most true something could possibly be, right? Something indubitable. He wanted to find an indubitable truth. And I that resonated with me deeply. And he came up with, I think, therefore I am. It's a very, very famous saying. And Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, the guy that says God is dead, he says, well, Descartes, you're presupposing that there is an I. You don't actually know that there is an I there. Well, there was this other guy that comes along and he answers Nietzsche. He's an atheist, and maybe somebody will correct me on who it is and name him, but I forget. I forget his name. Um, he's a very famous atheist, and he corrects Nietzsche. He goes, "Oh, hold on, hold on. We can at least know that there's thought." So I saw that as the atom. I saw that as the atom of philosophy. There is thought. So I knew that I had to take that as my foundation and work with that. And so let this mark the beginning of my explanation of the current ERI philosophy by Ori Knapp. The ERI being the elemental rational identity. So, with the claim that there's thought, there is there is implications that go along with that. And the atheist guy that explored this idea, he even concedes that within thought there is experience. Um, the thing is, though, is if there is something rather than nothing, then that gives anybody like me a chance to build from, atheist or not. So I'm just going to lay it out. I'll try to do it quickly, but I know it's not going to be quick. So, what I realized, and I don't remember where I heard this from, but I remember hearing something like it was like it was something to do with otherness. It was like relational experience, okay? And it was that relational experience kind of thing that like kind of had me pondering something. Because if there is thought, then there is something to think about. Otherwise, there is no thought. And so, because there's something to think about, there is that relation going on. Um, for example, if you think about a dot, it's never just going to be a dot. Like there's going to be background, there's going to be something to compare it to. Otherwise, if it's only a dot, you can't compare it to anything, and therefore it's essentially nothing at all. It's just a continuous thought line of meaningless information. Um, but we know that there's thought going on because there's things going on in our minds that are relational. To even say there's a dot is to imply that there's not a dot. Um, and I know some of the stuff I'm saying is going to be like it's going to trigger some philosophers out there like, wow, he actually, well, you got that wrong. It's fine. It's fine. I don't care if I'm making mistakes in explaining my thought process. Rather, come at this just trying to understand where I'm coming from. And if you want to nitpick later, fine. But at least hear me out. So there's thought. There's something to think about. Okay. If there's something to think about, then there is other stuff that you can compare it to, right? And so, because there's other stuff to compare it to, you're already in the realm of this kind of like normativity. There, not there. This thing versus not that thing, right? As soon as you compare, you got normativity going on. Um, and then so that would be like my step two. Thought requires distinction. Okay. You are distinguishing within your thoughts. So, um, and going from there, distinguishing requires um, a true and false polarity. I'm not saying something is necessarily this is true, this is false. Rather, it's a way in which we can gauge what we're distinguishing. It's not pointless distinction, right? It's actually meaningful distinction based on us, the subject. Okay. And that's where um, I would argue that the true and false polarity turns into a kind of good and bad polarity. And that is because we are able to distinguish between ourselves, the subject, and what is being thought of. So, this has some very serious implications. If I'm able to think about anything at all, then it's necessary that anything at all, in order for me to have knowledge of that at all, would mean that it needed to be existent in the first place, somewhere along the way. You can say that I downloaded that information, but the fact of the matter is that there is a truth that undermines that that concept of downloading that information. And that would be to even have the knowledge of that thing to download, it would have needed to have that something like it to be known of in the first place. So something along those lines in that polarity, something there needed to literally be knowable, which means existent. Now you can say, a unicorn or Santa Claus, right? Well, actually, we know of a man, a fat man, and we know of a horse. We know a pale horse, right? Like there's something relatable that we can compare it to, which grounds it as something knowable. Okay, so that's my little rant. I'm very rusty, so again, forgive me if I'm getting stuff wrong. But you can, dissect and criticize and whatever later on after I'm done. There might be some truth, and that's why I'm going over this in the first place. So, moving on. The Because there is this distinction and this true and false polarity stuff going on, that the polarity, the being able to compare it at all to anything, right, requires there to be something. It requires there to be a domain of content. Okay. So the statement is necessarily, if there is a true and false polarity, there exists a domain of truth apt content. Um, and sorry, it's I'm trying to remember exactly these fancy words and what they imply. Truth, values apply only to content. Denying content erases truth. I think I understand that quite well, and it makes sense. So there is no truth if there's nothing. It's basically what's going on there. Because there is something, then the idea for truth to even be there begins to emerge. Now, there's a lot of philosophy that'll say there is no truth, it's just made up, right? I'm aware of it. Just letting you know I'm aware. Okay, so moving forward. Um so the justifications. Thought is necessarily of something, which is otherness. Thought is normatively constrained, true, false, correct, incorrect. These constraints are not optional or subjective. Therefore, what thought is about must be capable of normativity constraining thought. Normative constraint requires reason giving structure. Therefore, otherness cannot be wholly reasonless, which then gives birth to the law of sufficient reason. Now, I was looking over this the other day, I think it was yesterday, and I was really struggling to remember why I even bothered making the argument for the law of sufficient reason in the first place, because the for me to do such a thing is to basically fight for somebody else's philosophy. At least that's my view. Is like that the law of sufficient reason, it's highly debated, and the whole reason that people debate it so heavily is because um, people don't really believe in there needing to be a sufficient reason, especially if there's brute facts. So people will argue for the sake of brute facts, which would which would totally delete the PSR, which is fine, whatever. But the problem is what ends up happening is that I need to make the argument for there being a law-like structure of reasoning, because if there really are facts, which that's what I'm arguing, then the facts aren't just nothing. They're not meaningless. Like the facts are attached to the content itself, from steps 1 and 4. So it's actually really quite natural that the law of sufficient reason comes into fruition because of the steps 1 through 4. This otherness factually being there. And where I'm making the argument that facts exist. Okay, and if facts factually exist, then uh, you can't have facts be otherwise, which deletes um, um, brute facts. And so that would remove the argument against LSR. And then because the LSR is there, I now get to say that things do have a reason. So it actually makes my job a lot easier in a way. Like this is the hardest step. Step 5 is the hardest step because it in itself is its own philosophy. But my steps 1 through 4 make the argument for the LSR. So, which I guess has never been done, maybe it has, correct me if I'm wrong, but um I'm making a very solid case that facts exist. There's thought, there's something to think about, and that because there's something to think about, uh, then the distinction is necessarily there, and that because there's a distinction that's even possible, then that requires otherness. And if there's otherness, then you have a polarity going on, and that's the birth of true and false. And And if you got if you got the true and false there, then you got the content there. It's like it's a very strong objection um, towards a lot of this brute fact solipsism garbage that keeps getting thrown around in philosophy. Um, so moving forward, we can test it. So the deductive form is to claim something has no reason presupposes the coherent use of reasons. Giving reasons presupposes reasoning works. Therefore, LSR and PSR is necessary for intelligibility, which I would agree. And then the test. So with the LSR and the PSR, it grounds and it helps ground intelligibility. Not that our thoughts already are intelligible. Transcendental test. So if you try to deny some facts don't need reasons, right? You deny PSR/LSR. In my opinion, this is just lazy. Like you can just, okay, you can say something doesn't need a reason. It's like, okay, then don't think about it, whatever. But that doesn't mean that there's not a reason if you look for it. So some facts don't need a reason. Well, if you try to argue this, you have to give reasons why some facts don't need reasons. You're using reasoning to deny the principle of reasoning. So the only argument is to remain silent, which then you can't assert anything intelligibly. So you end up in a performative contradiction, which I love. I love that you just end up absurd. If you try to argue against, like, I get that it's probably there's probably some kind of witty and intelligent argument you could make against my philosophy, but from what I've tested, it all ends up in this ridiculous realm of contradiction. But anyway, let's move on. I'm gonna stop at step 10. So just so you guys know, because step 10 is where we get to God. Okay, so every truth requires a truth maker. This is a big one. So we have the domain of content. We have the domain of truth. We have that. Now there needs to be something making that to be true in the first place. Why? Well, because we at least are doing something. We are determining if it's true and not true. We're deciphering right now. So we are attempting to be the truth maker. Okay. So at bare minimum, there has to be a truth maker now, because we're putting stake into the truth. So then we look at what's really giving us these truths, right? So the statement is every truth requires a truth maker. Going back to this LSR PSR thing, right? And we can deduce that from the LSR, nothing can be without sufficient reason. Truth has to be anchored in something that makes it true rather than false. Therefore, every truth necessarily requires a truth maker, and we can test it. Try to deny some truths don't have a truth maker, but then you assert you have to claim it's true that some truths lack truth makers. But if this claim is true, what makes it true? It would be you making it true, right? Well, if something makes it true, If nothing makes it true, then it's a brute fact, which would violate my step 5. But if something makes it true, then you've granted that truth makers exist. So either you violate my step 5 or you violate um, truth in general. So it's transcendentally necessary. So plain language contradiction would be to deny truth makers, you must assert truth about truth makers, but asserting a truth without grounding uses the very thing you claim doesn't exist. You cannot say P is true for no reason without performing the act that demands a reason. So the point is that the absurdity to argue against it is that you have to use contradictions. You have to contradict yourself. And I know step 6 is pretty confusing, but basically the claim is that uh, there needs to be something that is grounding uh, grounding the normativity within the content of steps 1 through 4, right? And I'm going to show you that it can't be you and that it can't be it. The thing that it is cannot be it alone. That grounds what it is. So, a sustaining ground must exist. Okay? Because that thing persists as its truth, right? Like there's this thing that we're thinking about, because it even has a blip in our cognition, that it must sustain at like any point in time. So whatever is sustaining it would be the truth maker. So when I write a sustaining ground S must exist, the S being the truth maker. Okay. So okay, so we're going to look at why these things can't be the way they are. And this is going to be hard to follow along, I understand, but I'm going to have it needs to jump back and forth in a strange way that I've never seen another philosophy do, which, maybe it means that mine's junk, but I don't think so. So basically, the necessity is that norms can't be brute facts, that it would violate the step 5 LSR, and they can't be self-generated, and they can't be grounded by non-minds, so like itself, right? It can't be itself that grounds itself. Because what ends up happening is that there is no intentionality within the thing. And so to go through it, it's actually quite simple. Path A is you say their norms are brute. Well, then you violate step 5, which we've already proven is a contradiction. Path B, you say norms come from non-minds. So you say rocks, particles, fields, they all ground logical norms. Well, non-minds lack intentionality and they cannot generate oughts. Why do these words matter right there? Well, we're talking about normativity. We're talking about what is going on within the mind that we have. Okay, we're talking about the things that we're thinking about have a prescriptive force, right? But the thing is that these things, they don't actually give any prescriptions. They would just be things, right? They're passive. So logic doesn't actually bind you that contradictions aren't wrong. That just They're just different. But to make that argument, you have to treat contradictions as wrong, which is itself a contradiction. So you use binding norms to deny binding norms. Okay. And then path C. So path C is the jump to step 8. All right. But before we get there, we're just going to finish here is that um, the thing that grounds normativity must be mind-like. So the step 8, the path C, is that you cannot be the thing that grounds the truths. Okay. And the reason why mainly is because you're contingent. Your brain is contingent. Your memory is contingent. The thing that you remember 5 seconds ago is different than what you remember 1 second ago. And so you cannot be the prescriptive force. You cannot be the ground of truth. Otherwise, and I'll show you the contradiction as to why that would be impossible. Would be if you are, it says the finite self grounds all truths and norms, then either norms become self-created and then are contingent, which would violate the LSR, or norms are illusions, which undermines true and false polarity, which contradicts steps 1 through 3, which we've already went through is impossible. I love these notes, by the way. They're very helpful. And then you can test it. You say, I ground all things, then either norms are my personal preferences, which is contingent, which then violates LSR. You say norms are illusions. Logic is an illusion. I can't reason. There's no reason to reason with me, right? Then I'm totally unintelligible. And so the plain language contradiction is if you're the source of all truth and law, then norms, what is true and false, are your personal preferences. And they're not necessary. So that all falls apart. So it can't be us, it can't be the thing itself, and it can't be and it can't come from a non-mind. Otherwise, you don't get to say that these things are prescriptive or have any kind of true or false, right? But we know that something is going on there that is true and false because we exist within our mind, with our minds. So somewhere along the way, mind is a factor that has to play into the entirety of true and false. So, which results in an ontological independent reality existing. Okay. So reality forcibly exists. It's literally there. You don't get to say you're a solipsist anymore. Why? Because we know that other stuff exists. We know that there is true and false content. It can't be true and false, or it can't be really there and then also have the normativity tagged along with it. Because it has normativity, and because it can't be brute, that we know that the things that we're perceiving, there is a degree of truth to it. Now you can still have hallucinations and stuff, but don't let that confuse you with there actually being a degree of truth to the world around you. If anybody tells you otherwise, then you're being misled. It would contradict the steps that we've already went through as airtight. So to help you um, understand the whole structure of this argument is to trap you. You are trapped. You're trapped because if you try to get out, you have to deny intelligibility. You have to accept contradictions as real. You have to abandon logic. You are quite literally trapped. And that was actually the name of the argument, was the trap, the transcendental rational alignment of particles. You know, it was a play on of the elemental rational identity. I was very committed to the the atom element argument. So, but yeah, it's intended to be a trap. If you've accepted any part, any one of these steps, then what ends up happening is that the steps, uh, they substantiate them each other step, and I'll show you that here in a little bit. Um, so anyway, step 9, reality exists. The statement is that there exists ontologically independent otherness, that reality not produced by the finite self. So there is something that we didn't make that is here. Okay? It's not something that we're creating in our heads. The transcendental test tried to deny that no independent reality exists, that everything is self-generated, then this equals claiming I ground all reality, which violates step 8, which we proved is a contradiction. Denying otherness means claiming that you are the thing that creates all content, which would be uh, contingent. You would be the thing that grounds all truth would be contingent, which would then be brute facts, right? So that's what hinges on everything, is that it's your claim. You want to sit there and try and claim that, oh, I'm the one that's making truth. No, because if I hold up a sword to you, that claim you just made is going to not it's not going to hold. It's going to be very real that I have a sword and I'm right in front of you and I can kill you with that sword. So these Buddhists that like to say, "Oh, this is not actually reality. This is just a figment of my imagination." You know, if you put that to the test, it ends up not being very realistic. So where was I? So yeah, if you try and say reality isn't real, then you end up in a contradiction. Now we're on step 10. Step 10 being there exists a mind-like sustaining ground that is the truth maker. Okay? So the reason we already have that there's a sustaining ground, okay? And we already have that the sustaining ground is the truth maker, okay? But now we add that it's mind-like. And the reason it's mind-like is because it in it because it has intentionality, it has prescriptive force, it has the ability to ground what is true and false. It gives power to the um it gives power to the agent as like preference. It gives preferential power to an agent that has preference. Otherwise, there wouldn't even be preference to begin with. So the deductive form is that norms require prescriptive force. Prescriptive force requires intentionality, it's aboutness and directedness, and that only minds have intentionality. Therefore, the ground of norms must be mind-like. And we can test it by through the steps 7, path B. You try to deny non-minds can ground norms. Non-minds can't generate oughts. Plain language is to deny a mind-like ground, you must let non-minds like rocks, particles, fields generate oughts, intentionality, logical necessity, mind. But non-minds cannot intend, cannot prescribe, cannot bind. Thus, logic loses normativity and then collapses. You use logic to deny the thing that makes logic possible. So 10, there's some stuff here that doesn't seem as clear, but within reality, what you see within the normatives, within the norms, you see things like biology, science, okay? We see the patterns of the structure of reality. You know, you have oughts, right? You have purpose within things like biology. You know, your heart's purpose is to pump blood, these kinds of things, okay? And they're not just floating there as like, hey, this is just a fun little fact, right? No, it's not just a fun little fact, because it is a fact. It's now a fact. Facts exist. It's not just a useful word. It's not just some useful little fiction. No. It is a fact that these proteins work with RNA and DNA to prescribe organs and cells and features to contribute to a animal. Somebody's here. But the point is that where was I? I lost my train of thought, but I want to just show you what this argument looks like when you run it through an AI. So I'm going to change my screen. I think that works. Okay, so I haven't read this yet. I have not read this yet, but I've been talking with Claude for the past couple of days, and I've been asking it to go through the argument and tell me what it thinks. And I'll just show you real quick. I asked it to go through like the different arguments that I have, and then I had it go through the one that I'm talking to you right now about, right? And it says, it's giving me some contentions and stuff, which is fine. But then I work with it. I say things like, okay, try again at max effort. So I turn this on to be maximum effort, right? I turned on thinking. Somebody joined my Discord. And then I had it do it again. So continuously it goes through step 4, it's airtight. It gets to step 5, and then it struggles. Why? Well, It's because step 5 is something that has been historically debated for a very, very long time. I said, okay, I lost you at step 5. Is that because that it's classically debated? Because you seem to agree with the reasoning in step 5 that it would result in performative contradiction. Does steps 1 through 4 force the logic of step 5 though? Because that is the case that it ends up that I make in the argument, is that step 1 and 4 actually give credibility to the LSR PSR. And so it goes through it and it says, honestly, yes, largely. Um, and so it goes through very carefully that step 5 does follow. Here, I'll go through it slowly in case you want to read it for yourself. Here, so you could like pause the video and look at the response. But you know, I had it go through and I said, okay, because step 5 is now accepted, doesn't that have implications that the rest of the steps are now correct? Right? And I said, and it granted me steps 1 through 10. It did. It said that it ultimately concluded that there is a God. And so I asked it again, are you 100% sure on steps 1 through 10? And so it pushes back a little bit, you know, it gives me a 2%, you know, could be otherwise. Well, why? Well, because it's a hotly debated topic, you know, the PSR thing. And that's what it is too. It's literally PSR. Um and then step 10 is says that it lost me a little bit here. Because the claim is that only minds generate genuine prescriptive normativity. Non-minds describe, they don't prescribe. Rather than 100 is the claim that only minds generate genuine normativity is doing real metaphysical work here. It's well defended within the framework. It's supported by Hume and the performative argument, but it's still a substantive metaphysical claim about the categorical nature of minds versus non-minds. A radical enough physicalist could try to bite the bullet and say their own argument is just a pattern, not binding, and shrug. Okay, so we went through this, you know, when I was talking to you, that the only argument that they're capable of is not arguing, is just literally being silent, right? And that this is the kind of absurdity that you get into. But you know, I acknowledge that you know, not arguing is it's an option. It's an option. But I think based on the previous steps, because there is normativity, there's truth. It's not merely substantive, that it is that the substance of all thought is true and false, grounded. And so I don't know why they would just say that at step 10 you can just throw all that out the window. It's losing that it would then lose, like, the whole argument loses credibility. It, some sometimes I think the AI just doesn't actually know what it's talking about. So anyway, I finalized, and this is going to be the final thing. Is here is I said, okay, let's go over it again, and give me each step. Put it simply, and then explain why each step is substantiated by the previous steps, or why the step would come next. Okay, I did that for this little video. I have not heard it, and I'm just going to play it now for us all to listen to while I conclude.
Okay. So this is something I encounter every time I use AI. That there'll be pushback, and that is okay. But then you have to challenge the pushback. So what I would do here um, is the AI sounds like it it wants to not take the bite on LSR PSR, but then it says, it's verified through step 6. So I want to ask, is step 5 verified through step 6? And your concern is that, how would I word this? Mm, and is airtight thanks to steps 1 through 4 and the following step 6. Secondly, I'm wanting to know what step 7 path B I'm wanting to know why you think step 7's path B is the weakest part of the argument, and why it's not airtight given the previous steps. And does step 10 logically follow, or is it a leap? If steps 1 through 9 are all airtight. It's been a long time since I've worked on this, so it's good to just take this with humility and try and go through it carefully. I'm going to tell you, I don't think that this is wrong. I just think that the AI right now could be just tripping. I think it could literally just be tripping up on some stuff. Logic is really hard for these LLMs to fully grasp. So I just want to, it's good to, triple, quadruple, quintuple check to see if their logic is flawed or if it's good. So I'm gonna send in these questions. Say, is step 5 verified through step 6? And is airtight thanks to 1 through 4 with the following step 6? Secondly, I want to know why you think step 7 path B is the weakest part of the argument and why it's not airtight given the previous steps. And does step 10 logically follow, or is it a leap? All right, let's see what it says. It's thinking hard. I'm pretty sure this is one of the most powerful AIs currently. One person watching. Is there a chat? No chat? Okay. Question 1. Says it needs to be careful. Step 5, ground 6. Step 1 through 4, ground 5. Step 5. Step 6 follows from step 5. That chain is solid, but step 6 can't loop back to verify step 5. Why? Okay, let's see what it says. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Um, okay, so step 7 is the stumbling block, and it's the is ought Hume gap, where it's a different kind of, I remember it was like it's a different kind of ought or something. No purely physical process can generate a genuine ought, only an is. Hume observed this, and it's widely accepted, but it's a substantive philosophical claim. It's not a performative contradiction. To deny it in the way steps 1 through 4 are, a naturalist can say, okay, so Hume is the stumbling block because Hume tries to disarm the metaphysic the theological baggage that comes with normativity. Hume is attempting to disarm rather than disarm through category versus accepting that there is normativity independent of our minds. Is this correct? Wait, am I understanding this correctly? I haven't read Hume, even if I'm using Hume's stuff in the paper. I haven't even read Descartes, just to be clear. Okay. I didn't need this big answer. I just wanted to see if it agreed or not. I'd be overclaiming it if I said it's fully solved the metaphysical gap in the way every philosopher would have to accept. Okay. Question 2. Is Hume trying to discern normativity through categories rather than accepting it as mind independent? Your reading is insightful, but needs some precision because Hume is actually doing two different things that are worth separating. The is ought gap itself, observation that you can't derive ought from, is purely logically logical point that most philosophers accept regardless of their views on God. It just says descriptive facts don't automatically yield normative conclusions. That's broadly accepted, including by many theists. But Hume's broader project, his use of the gap is closer to what you're describing. Okay. You wanted to naturalize normativity. Of course. To explain moral and normative claims as expressions of human sentiment rather than as cognitions about objective mind independent features of reality. So in that sense, yes, Hume is categorizing normativity as something that lives inside human responses, not something that exists independently of minds. That's where the argument in step 1 through 4 genuinely pushes back against that move. Right. So if your reading is Hume is trying to contain normativity inside human minds rather than letting it be objective and independent, steps 1 through 4 are genuine and serious response to that move because they establish normativity as objective and inescapable, not just a feeling. Dude, what are you saying right now? How could Hume ever be correct then if step 1 through 4 is correct? Hello? I mean, that just kind of seems obvious to me. Like, I get Hume is a genius and whatever, like philosophers want to just worship him, but the steps 1 through 4 destroy Hume's argument, in that we then don't get to say that these norms are mind independent, because they are both. They are mind and reality. Yikes. Yikes. Okay, hold on. Let me push back one more little time. Let me just say one thing to it real quick. I'm gonna say, okay, so you 1 through 4 destroy Hume's claim. Why are we even giving Hume air to breathe? Step 7, path B. If you admit right now that steps 1 through 4 eliminate this if you admit right now that steps 1, this is odd gap. All right, this is the last thing I'm going to see. I just want to see how it responds. I haven't talked to AI this long in a long time. But now my argument is, I think for the first time on the internet. Steps 1 through 4 do genuinely defeat Hume's sentimentalism. The move of reducing normativity to mere human sentiment or projection, that's real, because logical normativity is presupposed by any claim, including Hume's own. You can't say morality is just sentiment without treating that claim as correct rather than merely felt. Steps 1 through 4 close that escape. But I need to stop you. But I need to stop and be precise, because you're asking me to say something stronger. That steps 1 through 4 eliminate the is-ought gap entirely. And that's where I have to push back on my own drift in this conversation. The is-ought gap is actually two separate things. Hume's sentimentalism, claim that normativity is just human projection. Steps do actually defeat that, you agree. Logical observation that descriptive premises don't automatically yield prescriptive conclusions. That what is doesn't automatically tell you what ought to be. This is a different claim. Steps 1 through 4 don't eliminate. In fact, path B actually uses this gap. Reason, physical processes can't ground genuine normativity is precisely because there is a categorical difference between what particles do and what reasoning demands. So here's the thing you might have backwards. Hume's is-ought gap isn't threatening path B. It's working for path B. The gap between descriptive physical reality as prescriptive normative bindingness
is exactly the argument that non-minds can't be the ground. What Pappy still needs, and what steps 1-4 don't automatically supply, is the additional claim that intentionality, genuine directedness, and prescriptiveness is exclusively a property of minds. That's a philosophical premise. Well supported by Hume's sentimentalism, being defeated actually helps it, but it's not the same thing as defeating the is-ought gap. Okay. So I think I understand. It defeated the sentimentalism thingy. Gotcha. Um, let's see. All right, last thing, just real quick. All right, I'm done with my live. I just want this to play, and then I'm gonna close the live. Come on. Fuck. I don't know what to do. Physical processes describe, they don't prescribe. Okay. I'll have to work on it, I guess. This is good for me. I haven't worked on this in a long time, so this will give me a reason to um, come back and look at it. So I might go live again, and we'll go over it again. But thank you for watching. If you watched, goodbye.